As you quite rightly say, or I agree with you anyway, I'm so cynical now about this government that I'm in no doubt that the reason Boris has decided to save us Christmas is not really because of the statistics. It's because he realises he's so politically weak that might deal him a death blow. So he does not have the political strength to remove Christmas from our calendar this year twice in a row. And the reason for this, you were up in North Shropshire, there was the bombshell of North Shropshire, where the electorate there, the constituents, delivered a serious message to him. We're sick of your style of leadership. We're sick of your autocracy. We're sick of your high tax, green, non-conservative policies. Then came there was the parliamentary vote, of course, the Tory rebellions, the 100 MPs or so, the Tories who voted against his vaccine passport nightmare. And finally, of course, the big one, if you ask me, Lord David Frost, sensationally quitting at the weekend. Very much, that's the Brexit minister, very much Boris's right-hand man throughout Brexit, a conservative thinker, a true Tory, who said he did not like the direction of travel, and he did not like the reimposition of COVID measures because he thought we dispensed with all of that. Boris is in a lot of trouble, not forgetting, of course, Partygate, which, as much as he wants to dismiss it and call it tittle-tattle, it goes from bad to worse, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I think when you see those photos, I thought it was disgraceful, dishonest, disingenuous. I thought it was actually a smack in the face to people who've lost loved ones, who couldn't say goodbye to their family members, who saw them through a window whilst they were dying. And the Prime Minister and his chums are having cheese and wine whilst the rest of the country is locked down. You saw Allegra Stratton in that other video laughing about the fact they've been having parties at the heart of government. This is totally unacceptable. If you are there and you're making those decisions that you expect the public to abide by, the least you can do is abide by your own rules.
Yeah, it's a pattern that we've been seeing emerging for some time now. Of course, Dominic Cummings, Bernard Castle, followed by Matt Hancock, breaking his own rules at the heart of the health department, kissing his mistress when that wasn't exactly social distancing. And now, of course, all these parties. So these are very bad optics. But you were up in North Shropshire, weren't you, campaigning for Reform UK? I heard your colleague, or your boss, if you like, Richard Tice, the leader of the party, on Talk Radio, saying that what they were hearing on the doorstep was nothing to do with Omicron or the COVID crisis. It was a lot about the parties and a lot about the direction of the Tory party that they didn't understand. Don't forget, this was a 200-year-old Tory stronghold. 200 years. 60% of those people voted Brexit, and they were telling, Richard said that they were saying, we didn't vote Tory to pay high taxes to fund Boris's stupid green fantasy.
Right, absolutely right. If you look at this, a Tory stronghold, 63% Owen Paterson won by. And what was interesting is, having been in North Shropshire, and I was with Richard, the optics changed dramatically over those final weeks as the photographs came out. And what we saw was a change in the way people were voting. First of all, the normal traditional Conservative voter was going to stay at home. And then they were so incensed by what they saw, they wanted to vote for a party that could deliver a bloody nose. I have to say the Liberal Democrats played a blinder in terms of their campaigning. They very cleverly said they were the only party who could actually do that, which wasn't actually true. But as it turned out, a lot of our supporters decided to lend their votes to the Liberal Democrats. And that's why they got in. Also, they did play a very good campaign. Labour, nowhere to be seen whatsoever. And I think, the results were absolutely astounding. We weren't helped by the fact that our excellent candidate, Kirsty Walmsley, actually got COVID a week before that election. And as you know, in any by-election, it is really important to be out and about canvassing and campaigning in that final week. But there was no doubt what people wanted to do was to give the government a bloody nose. They were absolutely furious. And as you say, these traditional Tory voters want sort of low tax. They want light touch regulation. They don't want what Richard Tice calls con-socialism.
Yeah, it is con-socialism. That's exactly what it is. And I do think the one good thing about the tough time Boris has been having for the last couple of weeks, Shropshire, David Frost, the Tory rebellion, is it might set him slightly more on the straight and narrow. I'm in no doubt that if it wasn't for these three bad events that have engulfed him, he would have locked us down for Christmas. He doesn't feel he has the strength to do that anymore.
Well, I also don't know how much of this was also to get himself off the front pages. They were desperate to get rid of the Allegra Stratton problem. And then, of course, the photographs. And then, of course, by talking about lockdowns, by talking about restrictions, suddenly, of course, you change the whole narrative and dynamic of what is printed in the newspapers. But it actually hasn't worked. I also think what's extraordinary, and I'm going to blow our trumpet here, this time last year, Reform UK hadn't even been approved by the Electoral Commission. So we've gone on to fight all these by-elections. Richard came third, as you know, in Old Bexley and Sidcup, then, of course, North Shropshire, where we came fifth. So I'm really pleased that we started the year on 0%. We're now at 7%. And what this shows to me is actually the fluidity of British politics. People who have always been tribal and always voted Labour or always voted Conservative simply don't have anywhere else to go now. They want to see something fresh and something dynamic, and that's what we offer. And that's why I'm really pleased that to be part of it. But I mean, honestly, being up there and hearing some of the things that people were saying on the doorstep, not all very nice about the government.
You mentioned earlier that you fear that soon after Christmas, Boris will lock us down. Do you think he will have the guts to do that? I mean, I want to ask you about this mad sage modelling. Don't forget that earlier this week, towards the end of last week, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, was going around propagating the figure of 200,000 new Omicron cases a day, which were predicted by Sage's models. The health authorities over the weekend abandoned them, this number. Sajid Javid said it was valid, by the way. The health authorities abandoned them as ludicrously over the top, ludicrously too high. So these models, Neil Ferguson the other day predicting 7,000 deaths a day unless we're careful. You know, they're talking about 3,000 cases every day. You know, these models are becoming the scourge of our times. Yet Boris seems to be always motivated by them. As soon as Chris Whitty whispers the model results into his ears, off he goes. But do you think he really will lock us down after Christmas?
I do. And the reason I say that is because they also know, as you know, in that cabinet meeting, only 4 members of the cabinet voted for the lockdown to come in now. But I think the Prime Minister is under enormous pressure, obviously from Sage. We know their modelling isn't accurate, to say the least. But I think they've been told very clearly by members of Parliament that Parliament has to vote it through. So I think if the government had its way, it would lock down. I think they're going to have to put it to Parliament. And the question is whether Parliament acts appropriately and responsibly. And I would say they should not vote for a lockdown. But the problem is, of course, we know the whipping operation will be out in full force, and they may well do it. So the date that I'm being told is the 28th. That's when I think they'll be recalled to Parliament, and that's when they'll vote.
So just to get this into clear context, what we're talking about, if they do lock us down, it's because of this. Because although a lot of people are getting Omicron, not very many people are getting very ill from it. A very small minority may well end up in hospital. But because half the hospital staff have been forced to self-isolate because they've tested positive, they won't be able to treat them. Hence, the NHS might not be able to cope. So everything is self-created and unnecessary.
Well, and also, if you notice the nuance of language, we're not talking about lockdowns, are we? We're talking about circuit breakers, which essentially is a lockdown.
Yeah.
And so they're doing it in a way that would appeal to the public. And I actually don't think the public will buy it. If you look on Twitter, if you look on Facebook, there is such anger out there that people feel they're being played with by the government. If the government was straight with them, people could make appropriate decisions. But I think people just feel the government is making it up as it's going along. And I think that's probably actually right.
And I think it was about this time last year that the government was talking in terms of a quick circuit breaker in order to stop the spread of the virus. Going into January, of course, we began our quick circuit breaker, which ended in June.
Yeah.
So for God's sake, we're not going to go down that road again. It's just that statistically, look, last week, an average of 112 people a day died from COVID. By the way, one person every 4 minutes is dying from cancer. We cannot run this country over an obsession with one condition.
No.
On average, between 1,500 and 2,000 people a day die in this country. Why are we only obsessed with 112 who die of COVID, and we don't seem to care about the other 1,900?
Well,
we
not
can't
only that.
go on like this, can we?
No, we can't go on like this. And not only that, about 50% of those COVID cases seem to have got it in hospital. So you then have to ask yourself, where is this data coming from? What about the 5,000 missed cancers every single month? That's unacceptable. What about the elective procedures that are being put off for years and years? What about the fact you can't see a GP? All of this is going to come home to roost. So the government needs to actually sort of man up, I think, and make some decisions. The role of government is to govern, to make difficult decisions. And it's the one thing that the Prime Minister and the Cabinet can't seem to do correctly.